The NFL keeps on trying with the Rooney Rule. We're going to talk about how it got started and why the NFL still seems to struggle today.
But what that says is that if you're hiring a head coach, you have to interview a minority. And it has to be a legitimate interview. It can't be just a token thing. And, it's proven very, very effective. What it did is it gave the owners the opportunity of meeting other players, other potential coaches. And, they saw that, hey, this guy is pretty smart. He knows what he's doing. And we went from having maybe just one, African American to now we have 6 and 7. The Steelers have an African American, Mike Tomlin. He's our head coach. He does very well.
Welcome to Max Law. I'm Max. The NFL's Rooney Rule was established in 2003 to address the racial disparities between the amount of players in the league and the amount of coaches in the league. When initially established, the league mandated that a team with a head coaching vacancy interview one or more minority head coaching candidates. The Rooney Rule was named after the late Dan Rooney, who used to be the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers and at one time the head of the NFL's Diversity Committee. The NFL has made some recent changes to the Rooney Rule. The league now mandates that a team with a head coaching vacancy interview at least 2 minority external candidates and 1 minority candidate for their coordinator positions. In addition, teams must now interview at least 1 minority candidate for their front office position, and minority and female applicants must be included and considered for their front office positions as well. The NFL is presenting 2 resolutions that it hopes could level the playing field for minority candidates. The first proposal would end clubs' ability to block assistant coaches from interviewing for coordinator jobs with other teams. The second is a proposal that will provide teams enhanced draft stock for hiring minority candidates as head coaches or primary football executives. Now, the idea of tying an elevated draft stock to a minority head coach's hiring received a lot of pushback and controversy, so that proposition was tabled. Racism in sports very much aligns with racism in society. Barriers had to be broken, and for those barriers to be broken, a minority had to display extreme excellence only for the mere consideration for participation. Now, here are some notable black heroes that broke down barriers for African Americans in the United States. We have Thurgood Marshall for the law, Jackie Robinson for baseball, and James Brown for music. But I got a problem with these 3. How come they all played by the same person? Chadwick Boseman? Him? Is there anybody else? Does it always have to be Chadwick? I mean, I love Black Panther, Wakanda forever, but come on, man, is there anybody else? Come on, man. And now I hear he's going to play, Chadwick that is, he's going to play the first black samurai. I mean, he gets everything. He's going to get the first black samurai. I mean, no disrespect to Samurai Jack, because he was played by a brother. Now, with professional sports being such a fraternity, it thus leads to candidate pools drawing from the good old boy network. These old boy networks tend to leave out African Americans. And with the old boy networks being so impenetrable for the African Americans, it tends to leave little to no black representation for coaches and general managers in the NFL. In 2017, John Lynch was hired to be the San Francisco 49ers' new general manager with no front office experience. Now, the 49ers did interview minority candidates, but it seems that the old boy network was just stronger.
Do you have a problem with the 49ers hiring Lynch?
I have a big problem with it. And for the purposes of Lynch's family and him who's watching, he does an outstanding job at Fox. He was an outstanding football player. I don't know him personally. I'm not questioning anything about this man. My comments have absolutely nothing to do with Lynch himself. My issue is about the process. Jeff, Max, you know me. I'm all about the process of fairness. No executive experience whatsoever. No, not a member of a scout team, not a member of a player personnel department, not a GM, nothing absolutely, positively nothing off the field other than being an analyst for football. And you get not only the general manager's job, but a 6-year deal? 6 years? 6 years. And on top of it all, how did you get the job? Because you got a relationship with Kyle Shanahan because you used to play with his father and you know him. And as a result, you picked up the phone and you asked him, let's rap, let's talk. And then after that, you spent a couple of nights at Ned York's house, okay? And then after that, you land a 6-year deal. And I say this, and I know this makes folks uncomfortable, but it's first take, so I'm going to put it right there. I don't know of any black man in history that has gotten a GM job in NFL history under such circumstances.
A 2007 New York University Law Review article by Brian W. Collins dives into the unconscious bias of people and how it affects the NFL. The article explains that the underrepresentations of blacks in positions of management and power is due to two forms of racism. One is institutionalized racism, and second is the maintenance of automatic or implicit stereotypes, aka unconscious bias. Now, the article explains unconscious bias as such. Most of us do not recognize the ways in which our cultural experience has influenced our beliefs about race or the occasions on which those beliefs affect our actions. In other words, a large part of our behavior that produces racial discrimination is influenced by unconscious racial motivation. Unconscious bias is prevalent in professional sports. The bias has influenced and played a part in the selections of head coaching through stereotypes regarding African Americans' so-called intellectual inferiority and the establishment and maintenance of the Old Boy Network. At the start of the 2001 NFL season, there were only 3 minority head coaches: Herman Edwards of the Jets, Tony Dungy of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Dennis Green of the Minnesota Vikings. All 3 head coaches had a combined win-loss record of 24-24. Tony Dungy and Herman Edwards posted winning records. Dennis Smith struggled that season, but he was very successful throughout his 10 years with the Minnesota Vikings. In January of 2002, both Green and Dungy were terminated from their head coaching positions. And at the time, they were one of the 2 most winningest coaches in the NFL. Now, during his 10-year tenure with the Minnesota Vikings, Dennis Green had 8 playoff appearances, 1 Super Bowl appearance, a 97-63 record, very impeccable, and only 1 losing season. Tony Dungy posted a 54-42 record and 4 playoff appearances. So let me get this straight. You get all this success and you get terminated anyway? Well, isn't winning supposed to have rewards and loyalty? Maybe we shouldn't play to win the game anymore. What do you think, Herman Edwards?
You play to win the game. Hello? You play to win the game. You don't play to just play it.
I mean, I hear you, Herman Edwards. I hear you, but, you know, if you're doing all this winning and you're going to get fired, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. In September of 2002, attorneys Johnny Cochran and Cyrus Mehri drafted a report detailing the NFL's poor record of hiring minority coaches in positions of management and coaching. The report, titled "Black Coaches in the NFL: Superior Performance, Inferior Opportunities," compiled 15 years of data detailing that despite the success of black coaches, they were terminated more quickly than their Caucasian counterparts who had poorer records. The report also finds that white assistant coaches with little experience were hired continuously over highly qualified black assistant coaches or former black head coaches. Johnny Cochran and Cyrus Mehri threatened suits against the NFL if significant changes weren't made. Those suits would include Title VII claims. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a federal law that protects employees against discrimination based on certain specified characteristics like race, color, national origin, sex, and religion. Under Title VII, an employer may not discriminate with regard to any term, condition, or privilege or employment. Areas that may give rise to violations include recruiting, hiring, promoting, transferring, training, disciplining, discharging, assigning, work, measuring performance, or providing benefits. Now, the NFL didn't want any of that bad PR, so they reacted quickly. They formed the NFL's Diversity Committee, which was headed by Dan Rooney, who is the namesake of the Rooney Rule. Now, let's talk about whether the Rooney Rule was actually an affirmative action policy. Affirmative action laws are policies instituted by the government to help level the playing field for those historically disadvantaged due to factors such as race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. These laws typically pertain to equal opportunities in employment, education, and business. Now, proponents of the Rooney Rule are very reluctant to label the rule as an affirmative action policy. But it's hard to argue that it's not, especially since it does try to level the playing field for minorities. The Rooney Rule is more so a soft affirmative action policy. Soft affirmative action policies are programs that use outreach attempts like counseling and recruitment. Hard affirmative action policies are typically frowned upon because they use quotas and preferences that reserve a specific number of openings solely for members of a specified class. Now we're going to talk about teams that violated or fake hustled their way through the Rooney Rule. In 2003, Steve Mariucci at the time was a very successful NFL coach. The Michigan native compiled a 60-43 win-loss record. So when there was a vacant head coaching position for the Detroit Lions, Matt Millen, the president of the Lions, made his intentions very known that he was going after Mariucci. Now Millen was well aware of the Rooney Rule. So what he did, he invited 5 minority candidates to come in to interview for the job. All 5 declined because they knew it was a sham, as Millen was dead set on getting Mariucci. Now Millen was really scared on losing out on Mariucci, so he decided to non-comply with the Rooney Rule, cancel all efforts to interview minorities, and hire Steve Mariucci. The NFL thereafter fined the Detroit Lions $200,000. As we can see here, the Rooney Rule is effective if a team has a head coaching vacancy position and they're starting out with a blank canvas. But what happens if a team has interest in a specific head coach and the feeling is mutual? Well, what you get is sham interviews, especially if a team wants to comply with the Rooney Rule. In 2003, the Dallas Cowboys were going after Bill Parcells as their next head coach. But with the Rooney Rule in full effect, owner Jerry Jones knew he couldn't do a straight hire. So what he did is he interviewed Dennis Grover, a black head coach candidate, for 30 minutes over the phone.
What the hell's going on out here?
Exactly. Now, Bill Parcells was eventually hired. A couple years later, he got to coach quarterback Tony Romo. A couple years after that, in 2007, Tony Romo and the Cowboys compiled a NFC-leading 13-3 record. They were the favorites to go to the Super Bowl from the NFC. Until this happened.
On 4th down, clock running, intercepted, Giants, McQuarters, and the New York Giants are 9 seconds away from advancing to the NFC Championship.
Yeah, boy, Giants, baby, man, we went in there and we took that game, boy. They beat us twice in the regular season, and we went into Dallas and ended their whole season, baby. Woo! How about them Cowboys? Right, Stephen A?
You said, how about those Cowboys? How about them, Skip?
The NFL is a global board organization, and this makes it difficult for African Americans to be a part of, specifically when these powerful people are comprised of white men. This kind of group setting allows unconscious bias to grow, and unconscious bias dictates owners on how they manage and choose their personnel. Now we're going to dive into a study conducted by Scott and Brooks that examines the NFL post the Rooney Rule that was established in 2003. Scott Brooks is an associate professor at the Arizona State University and a director of research at the Global Sports Institute. An interesting part of his study is the racialized corporations theory. That theory says that corporations are racialized structures that centers around whiteness as their default. He uses this theory to make sense of going from 10 black head coaches in 2011 to the termination of 5 black head coaches during and after the 2018 season that left the league with just 3 black head coaches to start the 2019 season: Mike Tomlin, Anthony Lynn, and Brian Flores. He states the NFL can force teams to interview minority candidates, but it can't change stereotypes and stigma surrounding African Americans and other people of color. Such untrue black stereotypes like intellectual inferiority has persisted in sports since the beginning of athletic competition. For example, in 1987, LA Dodgers executive Alan Campanis made this statement on why there were very few African American managers in baseball.
Why is it that there are no black managers, no black general managers, no black owners?
Well, Mr. Koppel, there have been some black managers, but I really can't answer that question directly. The only thing I can say is that you have to pay your dues when you become a manager. Generally, you have to go to minor leagues. There's not very much pay involved. And some of the better known black players have been able to get into other fields and make a pretty good living in that way.
Yeah, but you know in your heart of hearts, and we're going to take a break for a commercial, you know that that's a lot of baloney. I mean, there are a lot of black players, there are a lot of great black baseball men who would dearly love to be in managerial positions. And I guess what I'm really asking you is to, peel it away a little bit. Just tell me, why do you think it is? Is there still that much prejudice in baseball today?
No, I don't believe it's prejudice. I truly believe that they may not have some of the necessities to be, let's say, a field manager or perhaps a general manager.
You really believe that?
Well, I don't say that they're all of them, but they certainly are short. How many quarterbacks do you have? How many pitchers do you have that are black? Same
yeah, but
thing
I mean,
applies.
I got to tell you, that sounds like the same kind of garbage we were hearing 40 years ago about players when they were saying, not really cut out. You remember the days, hit a black football player in the knees, and no, that really sounds like garbage if you forget to say so.
It's not garbage, Mr. Koppel, because I played on a college team, and the center fielder was black, and in the backfield at NYU with a fullback who was black. Never knew the difference of whether he was black or white. We were teammates. So it just might be that why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
Oh, it may just be that they don't have access to all the country clubs and the pools.
Major League executives and Dodger executives really tried to distance themselves from such a statement, but they didn't really give an explanation as to why there were very few African Americans in positions of management at the time. Now this one is a doozy from the infamous and late Marge Scotch, who was the owner of the Cincinnati Reds. In 1992, she stated bluntly, "I once had an N-word work for me. I would never hire another N-word. I'd rather have a trained monkey working for me than an N-word." And that was just less than 30 years ago. Now, among other findings, the Scott Brooks study made the following conclusions. In 2012, only 19% of head coaching jobs were held by non-whites. In 2019, that percentage dropped to 12.5%. And you compare that to African Americans comprising the 70 to 75% of all NFL players. NFL head coaches of color had higher playing experiences than their white counterparts. And regarding the pipeline of the head coach to coaching positions, there's a severe lack of diversity. And this is particularly concerning because the hot hiring trend right now are offensive coordinators. Even though it has made some positive impacts, the Rooney Rule as it stood in 2003 did not incentivize teams enough to consider and hire minority candidates for coaching and senior management positions. Heading into the 2020 season, the NFL had just 4 minority head coaches: Mike Tomlin of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Anthony Lynn of the Los Angeles Chargers, Brian Flores of the Miami Dolphins, and Ron Rivera of the Washington Redskins, who was fired by the Carolina Panthers last December. The Dolphins' Chris Greer and Cleveland Browns' Andrew Berry are the only minority general managers. Clearly, an unconscious bias remains in the NFL today. The league has recently made revisions to the Rooney Rule to bolster the interviewing process and include minorities in hopes for a more inclusive NFL. The purpose of the Rooney Rule is to cultivate genuine interest in minority candidates. It shouldn't be the case where the owner shows up to the interview with a minority candidate only because they don't want to get fined.
I'm here so I won't get fined. I'm here so I won't get fined. I'm here so I won't get fined. I'm just here so I won't get fined. Hey, I'm here so I won't get fined. I'm here so I won't get fined. Hey, you better make more with your time. You only got 3 more minutes. I'm just here so I won't get fined.
aside from the proposition that was tabled that would tie elevated draft picks to a hiring of a minority coach, there is positive reaction to the proposals and positive reaction to the changes of the Rooney Rule. Hopefully teams are more incentivized and slow down their process and include minorities and hire minorities and truly make the NFL more inclusive. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Max Law. If you want to continue this discussion, leave a comment below the video. Hit the like button, share, and subscribe so you can take your legal game to the max.